966.
There's been a good amount of activity in Saudi Arabia's mining and industry sectors of late. A few headlines generated by the kingdom's mining and industry minister, Bandar AlKhorayef. The minister and his team recently visited Australia for a big event there, the International Mining and Resources Conference, IMARC. Of course, his delegation there comes days after he launched the National Industrialization Strategy at CAPSARC earlier this month, an event I attended, actually at the invitation of the Deputy Minister there, which really highlighted the ambition from the minister. It sort of had the feeling of like an Apple launch event. It was a really big deal. And the Deputy Minister, Osama Zamil, both of them gave keynote addresses about what they're doing there. And clearly they're working really long hours in overdrive at the ministry. So back to Australia. First, Saudi Arabia is maybe considering setting up a new metals and mining stock exchange index, which is very interesting. The minister told Reuters in an interview in Sydney that his team met with Australian counterparts to learn more about a mining index similar to what Australia has, which lists metals and mining firms and producers of gold, steel, and precious metals. So AlKhorayef said, we're looking at it. He said, quote, "It's something we are studying. We have not made up our mind. We do have NOMU. That's the secondary listing to Tadawul. So we'll take a look at it. Under consideration for now." More broadly in the sector, Richard, AlKhorayef said Saudi Arabia plans to award over a dozen mining exploration licenses to international investors in the coming year. 5 new exploration sites are up for licensing, and the kingdom will release details of an additional 10 opportunities next year. This was in a speech, actually, the minister said at IMARC. More than 145 licenses have been issued so far, and the country has seen a 27% year-on-year growth in mining revenue, which is impressive. The minister also also referenced the recently announced ambitious strategy to attract investments worth $32 billion into the sector. Of course, we've talked about this a lot, Richard, on the 966. There was the recent auction of a potentially lucrative contract for the Kanagia mining site, my favorite word to pronounce now. And in another interview, Richard, I shared this with you right before the show with im-mining.com. Really good interview with the minister. And I'll put this in the comments in the show notes on YouTube and on the podcast platform. AlKhorayef described what is different about the kingdom's mining and minerals approach over the last 2 years versus before. He said really 3 things. First, the new Saudi mining investment law, which came into force January 2021, sort of reset everything to better encourage and facilitate mining investment. Second was the Saudi Geological Survey. He said, especially improving the detail, quality, and availability of mineral exploration information. And third, he said, was manpower and human resources. Quote, "How we can link a growing minerals sector with our industries." These 3 things, he said, have formed a sequence of events that together are making for a full picture. He also talks in this interview about the importance of mining tech incentives, the importance of developing skilled workers. Really kind of an amazing interview, just really good. So I'll make sure I include that. Richard, mining also ties in very closely with another one of the most important industries in the coming few decades globally, and that's batteries, especially for energy storage and for EVs. Of course, there was the announcement this week that Saudi Arabia would launch a new EV in a JV with Foxconn called Seer. I think I'm saying that right, CEER, Seer. Also in that announcement was Saudi Arabia saying it will be making a stronger push into mining and will continue ahead with plans for an electric vehicle battery metals plant, which is interesting. This could sort of be the next gold rush for the world in the years to come. Richard, you shared this week, or I think it was Monday, the S&P Global Mobility special report called "A Reckoning for EV Battery Raw Materials." The first line of this is, quote, "Geopolitical turbulence and the fragile and volatile nature of critical raw material supply chain could curtail planned expansion in battery production, slowing mainstream electric vehicle adoption and the transition to an electrified future." So really just putting all this together, the minister and his team, Minister AlKhorayef, Deputy Minister for Mining Affairs Khalid Al-Mudaifer, Deputy Minister Osama Zamil, these guys are full steam ahead, and they're sort of finding the sweet spot for Saudi Arabia, which is really leaning into mining and developing this industry as a way to diversify. Just shows how important these sectors are to the kingdom. And looking ahead a little bit, Richard, the ministry, and I'll wrap up with this, recently announced that the second edition of the Future Minerals Forum will take place in January of 2023, so in about 2 months. actually 2 months from today. And if the launch of the National Industrialization Strategy at CapStark, which I attended, was any indication, one can bet this will be a pretty big event. Lots going on in this space. We've covered a lot of it on the 966. I thought it'd be kind of good to use the opportunity to get a little updated on it, but they're full steam ahead over there.
Yeah, it's a good one. And it's always a good one to do minerals and mining, especially there's a couple things. So just to riff off of what you said, that S&P report, mobility report was I pulled that for our quotable on Tuesday, I think. And the quoted was, and for those who you don't know, the Sustug review comes out daily. It has any number, probably 20 to 25 cited articles about Saudi Arabia in the region, and it's broken up with a feature, P1, and then a quoted, and then three what we call CSs. But anyway, those are storylines we think are important, and then you have the body of the newsletter. But the quoted for that day was, quote, "The battery will be the defining technological and supply chain battleground for the industry in the next decade, and access to the constituent raw materials will be crucial," unquote. That's from that S&P mobility report. So just to reiterate what you were talking about, but the mining industry in Saudi is interesting because it's, I mean, going way back when you always heard third pillar, mining industry, a third pillar. And what does that mean, third pillar in the industry? That means, oil and petrochemical are two pillars. They want to make mining a third pillar. You referenced that 32 billion that was in investments, not that they're spending, but they want to attract 32 billion investments, was announced in May. And the nice thing about the mineral sector in Saudi Arabia is it's already making money. And it really right now, it's a matter of obviously expanding it, getting more, growing it, but it's already quite a lucrative sector. I mean, in 2022, expected revenue was just under 300 billion. What's notable about that is in 2016, when Vision 2030 was announced, it was 180 billion. So it had gone down a little bit. So it fluctuates, but it's on the upswing. It's projected to grow 10% a year, annual growth rate of 10% a year between 2022 and 2025. So it's on a nice trajectory. They're really expanding it, aggressively moving forward. And they've got in January upcoming the second Future Minerals Forum, which they did. The first one this year was quite successful. It had rolled out, as you mentioned, new mining law earlier in the year. Really going hard at this industry, and it does marry up with, we're going to have a yellow. One of the yellow items will be on SEER and that Foxconn tie-up. But this does have the potential to really tie in nicely with a really budding EV ecosystem, manufacturing ecosystem between Lucid and Foxconn in Saudi Arabia. So you see a lot of things coming together, but just the long and the short of it, the mining industry is generating a lot of revenue for Saudi Arabia, and it will continue to do so.
Yeah, great points. I really like the name Arabian Shield. I think that sounds really cool.
sounds
yeah, this is this is the reason why all great points. The reason why I chose this is just because there's so much going on, and it seems like it's all tied together in a way. And EVs, and I don't want to step on our forthcoming yellow, EVs really sounds like it might be sort of where it will be, like sort of the nucleus of that. So
well, I mean, that SEER thing was almost my one big thing. It may yet be my one big thing because it's really a cool, it's a coup. It's a really neat thing. So, but I definitely that was a good topic for our one big thing because it's always, like I said, it's a strength of the strength in the minerals and mining right now with Saudi Arabia. It seems to be under good leadership, really ambitious leadership, and the trajectory is up.